ruffians with dishonorable intentions, the alarms of science, her attempts to preserve that which is dearer than life itself, submission, then a fidelity like Mrs. Micawber's. So many of these ruffians, or wandering comedians, that were hated, or scorned, pitied, embraced, conventionalized. There's not a notion in this book that has a more frightful or ridiculous mien that had the notion of human footprints in rocks, when that now respectabilized ruffian or clown was first heard from. It seems bewildering to one whose interests are not scientific that such rows should be raised over such trifles. But the feeling of a systematist toward such an intruder is just about what anyone's would be if a tramp from the street should come in, sit at one's dinner table, and say he belonged there. We know what hypnosis can do. Let him insist with all his might that he does belong there, and one begins to suspect that he may be right, that he may have higher perceptions of what's right. The prohibitionists have this worked out very skilfully. So the row that was raised over the stone from Grave Creek, but time and cumulativeness, and the very factor we make so much of, or the power of massed data. There were other reports of inscribed stones, and then, half a century later, some mounds, or caches, as we call them, were opened by Reverend Mr. Gass, near the city of Davenport. American Antiquarian, 15-73. Several stone tablets were found. Upon one of them the letters "TFT OWNS" may easily be made out. In this instance we hear nothing of fraudulency. Time, cumulativeness, the power of massed data. The attempt to assimilate this datum is, that the tablet was probably of Mormon origin. Why? Because at Mendon, Illinois, was found a brass plate, upon which were similar characters. Why that? Because that was found "near a house once occupied by a Mormon." In a real existence, a real meteorologist, suspecting that cinders had come from a fire engine, would have asked a fireman. Tablets of Davenport. There's not a record findable that it ever occurred to any antiquarian to ask a Mormon. Other tablets were found. Upon one of them are 2 F's and 2 8's. Also a large tablet, 12 inches by 8 to 10 inches, "with Roman numerals and Arabic." It is said that the figure 8 occurs 3 times, and that the figure or letter O 7 times. "With these familiar characters are others that resembled ancient alphabets, either Phoenician or Hebrew." It may be that the discovery of Australia, for instance, will turn out to be less important than the discovery and the meaning of these tablets. But where will you read of them in anything subsequently published? What antiquarian has ever since tried to understand them, and their presence, and indications of antiquity, in a land that we're told was inhabited only by unlettered savages? These things that are exhumed only to be buried in some other way. Another tablet was found at Davenport by Mr. Charles Harrison, president of the American Antiquarian Society. "8 and other hieroglyphs are upon this tablet." This time also fraud is not mentioned. My own notion is that it is very unsportsmanlike ever to mention fraud. Accept anything, then explain it your way. Anything that assimilates with one explanation must have assimilable relations, to some degree, with all other explanations, if all explanations are somewhere continuous. Mormons are lugged in again, but the attempt is faint and helpless, "because general circumstances make it difficult to explain the presence of these tablets." Altogether, our phantom resistance is mere attribution to the Mormons, without the slightest attempt to find base for the attribution. We think of messages that were showered upon this earth, and of messages that were cached in mounds upon this earth. The similarity to the Franklin situation is striking. Conceivably, centuries from now, objects dropped from relief expedition balloons may be found in the Arctic, and conceivably there are still undiscovered caches left by Franklin in the hope that relief expeditions would find them. It would be as incongruous to attribute these things to the Eskimos as to attribute tablets and lettered stones to the aborigines of America. Some time I shall take up an expression that the queer-shaped mounds upon this earth were built by explorers from somewhere, unable to get back, designed to attract attention from some other world, and that a vast sword-shaped mound had been discovered upon the moon. Just now we think of lettered things and their two possible significances. A bizarre little lost soul rescued from one of the morgues of the American Journal of Science. An account, sent by a correspondent to Professor Silliman, of something that was found in a block of marble, taken November 1829, from a quarry near Philadelphia. American Journal of Science, 1-19-361. The block was cut into slabs. By this process, it is said, was exposed an indentation in the stone, about 1½ inches by 5/8 of an inch, a geometric indentation. In it were two definite-looking raised letters, like I, U. Only difference is that the corners of the U are not rounded, but are straight angles. We are told that this block of stone came from a depth of 70 or 80 feet, or that, if acceptable, this lettering was done long ago. To some persons not sated with the commonness of the incredible that has to be accepted, it may seem grotesque to think that an indentation in sand could have tons of other sand piled upon it and hardening into stone, without being pressed out. But the famous Nicaraguan footprints were found in a quarry under 11 strata of solid rock. There was no discussion of this datum. We only take it out for an airing. As to lettered stones that may once upon a time have been showered upon Europe, if we cannot accept that the stones were inscribed by indigenous inhabitants of Europe, many have been found in caves, whence they were carried as curiosities by prehistoric men, or as ornaments, I suppose, about the size and shape of the Grave Creek stone or disk, "flat and oval and about 2 inches wide," Solis. Characters painted upon them, found first by Mr. Piet in the cave of Mas d'Azil, Ariège. According to Solis, they are marked in various directions with red and black lines, "but on not a few of them more complex characters occur, which in a few instances simulate some of the capital letters of the Roman alphabet." In one instance the letters F, E, I, accompanied by no other markings to modify them, are as plain as they could be. According to Solis (Ancient Hunters, p. 95), Mr. Cartaillac has confirmed the observations of Piet, and Mr. Boulle has found additional examples. "They offer one of the darkest problems of prehistoric times." Solis. As to caches in general, I should say that they are made with two purposes: to proclaim and to conceal; or that caches in documents are hidden, or covered over, in conspicuous structures. At least, so are designed the cairns in the Arctic. Transcripts of the New York Academy of Sciences, 11-27. That Mr. J.H. Hooper, Bradley County, Tennessee, having come upon a curious stone in some woods upon his farm, investigated. He dug,